tales. God floods the earth, sparing Noah, his family, and 2 of every animal on board his ark.
Now, an international team of researchers have found new evidence that a famous formation in Turkey could be the site of the ancient vessel.
There is a mountain in eastern Turkey that has been keeping a secret for over 4,000 years.
According to the Bible, he was chosen of God to survive a great cataclysm.
It sits in the shadow of Mount Ararat, a volcanic giant that claws its way more than 16,000 feet into the sky. The surrounding landscape is brutal and empty.
Durupinar's photos create real kind of firestorm of controversy and excitement.
Winds cut across the plateau like something alive. And yet, 18 miles south of Ararat's peak, pressed into the earth at roughly 6,500 feet above sea level, lies a formation so strange, so geometrically precise, so perfectly shaped, that when you see it from the air, your brain struggles to process it. It looks exactly like a ship. Not just any ship, a massive, ancient, buried vessel. One that measures 515 feet from end to end. One that mirrors, almost perfectly, the dimensions written down thousands of years ago in the book of Genesis. And in 2024 and 2025, a team of American researchers pointed some of the most advanced scanning technology ever developed directly at that formation, and what came back from beneath the earth stopped them cold. Now here is the question you need to sit with before we go any further. What if the ancient world's most famous survival story isn't mythology at all? What if Noah's Ark was real, and what if we just found it? This is the story of the Durupinar Formation, the technology that is peeling back its secrets layer by layer, and the one man whose life's work makes this discovery more explosive than anyone expected, Graham Hancock. Flood that changed everything. If you know Graham Hancock, you already know he does not play it safe. The British author and investigative journalist has spent 3 decades doing something that mainstream academia finds deeply uncomfortable. He asks questions they don't want asked. He visits sites they'd rather not explain. And he draws connections across ancient civilizations that conventional archaeology insists are coincidental. His central argument, laid out across best-selling books like Fingerprints of the Gods and dramatized in his explosive Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse, which pulled 25 million viewing hours in its first week alone, is both simple and staggering. He believes a sophisticated, advanced civilization existed on Earth before 12,000 years ago, a civilization that had mastered architecture, astronomy, mathematics, and seafaring. A civilization that was almost completely erased from history by a global catastrophe, a comet strike around 12,800 years ago, during a period scientists call the Younger Dryas, that triggered massive climate collapse, extinction-level wildfires, and, here's the part that connects to everything we're about to tell you, a devastating, world-altering flood. According to Hancock, the survivors of that lost civilization didn't simply vanish, they scattered. They carried their knowledge to the corners of the earth, seeding what we now call the first known civilizations, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the builders of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site that has been radiocarbon dated to approximately 11,600 years ago, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years and forcing a complete rethinking of when humans became capable of monumental construction. And here is where it gets personal. One of Hancock's most consistent arguments is that the world's great flood myths, found in over 200 cultures on every inhabited continent, are not coincidences. They are encoded memories, collective trauma, passed down through story and scripture, because the event they describe actually happened. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Hindu Manusmriti, the Greek tale of Deucalion, the indigenous stories of North America, and yes, Genesis, the story of Noah. Hancock has argued for years that these myths are pointing us toward a real catastrophe, a real flood, and perhaps a real vessel. The question he could never fully answer was, where is the physical proof? The answer may be buried in the mountains of Turkey, Are you starting to see why this matters? Because what researchers have just pulled out of the ground at Durapinar doesn't just vindicate the Bible. It may vindicate Graham Hancock's entire life's work, a shepherd, a storm, and a discovery nobody expected. The year was 1948. A season of unusually intense rainfall swept through eastern Turkey, and seismic tremors shook the earth near the Ararat region. When the ground settled and the mud washed away, something extraordinary was exposed. On a remote mountainside, a shape in the earth that had been buried, possibly for millennia. A Kurdish shepherd stumbled across it first. He probably had no idea what he was looking at, but the shape was unmistakable from a distance. It curved the way a hoe curves. It tapered the way a bow tapers. It sat in the earth like something that had been there a very, very long time. The wider world didn't learn about it until 1959, when a Turkish military aerial survey captured it in a photograph. The image was later examined by Captain İlhan Durapinar, whose name the formation now carries. When the photo circulated among researchers and biblical scholars, it created an immediate sensation. The site is located near the village of Uzengili in Turkey's Ağrı province, just 18 miles south of Mount Ararat. The mountain scripture specifically names as the resting place of Noah's Ark. Genesis 8:4 is unambiguous. And in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Sit with that for a moment, because here is what we now know about the Durapinar Formation's location and dimensions. And here is where even the most committed skeptic in the room has to take a breath. The formation is approximately 515 to 538 feet long. The book of Genesis describes the ark as 300 cubits in length. Using Egyptian cubit measurements, the standard of the ancient world, 300 cubits converts to between 135 and 157 meters, or roughly 443 to 515 feet. The Durapinar Formation sits squarely within that range. The width of the formation? Approximately 86 feet, matching the biblical 50 cubits. The estimated height of the buried structure? Around 52 feet, matching the biblical 30 cubits. 3 dimensions, across 3 measurement categories, all lining up with a text written thousands of years before anyone with a modern measuring tool ever set foot on that mountain. At what point does coincidence stop being a satisfying explanation? Turkey's government didn't wait around for that philosophical debate. The country officially designated the area as Noah's Ark National Park, a recognition that this is not just another geological curiosity, but the dimensions alone, remarkable as they are, were never going to be enough. Mainstream geology had an answer ready. Natural formations can be deceptive. Erosion, mud flow, volcanic activity, these forces can produce curves and boundaries that fool the human eye. The brain sees patterns. It wants to see a ship. What happens, though, when you stop looking with your eyes and start looking beneath the surface? The machine that sees underground, ground-penetrating radar, GPR, is not a fringe technology. It is used by archaeologists, engineers, military units, and geologists worldwide. It works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measuring the time it takes for those pulses to bounce back. Different materials, rock, soil, wood, air, water, reflect signals differently. What comes back is a subsurface map, a portrait of what lies beneath. The Noah's Ark Scans Project, a joint initiative with Ağrı İbrahim Çeçen University and international researchers, has been running GPR surveys at the Durapinar site since 2019. The team's lead investigator, independent researcher Andrew Jones, has spent years analyzing the data. And in 2024 and 2025, using advanced imaging software to re-examine the 3D scan data, the team reported findings that set the archaeological world on fire. Let's go through what they found, because each discovery builds on the last. And by the time we're done, you're going to understand exactly why this has people shaking. Finding number 1. The central corridor. Beneath the surface of the Durapinar Formation, running through the center of the structure, GPR scans revealed a corridor approximately 43 feet, 13 meters wide. A passageway, a tunnel running the length of the formation's interior. Andrew Jones described it plainly. Structures are lining up underground, and they are not random. These right-angled formations, Jones stated, strongly suggest intelligent design. Ask yourself this: when was the last time a natural mud flow arranged itself into right-angled corridors? Finding number 2. Side corridors and room-like chambers. It didn't stop at one corridor. Analysis of the GPR data revealed additional lateral corridors, side passageways that branch off from the central one. These are described by the researchers as corridor-like compartments, consistent with interior rooms. The Genesis account describes 3 decks on the Ark, a lower, a second, and a third floor. The scans detected what appear to be 3 distinct underground layers matching that exact description. Jones confirmed. The presence of hallways and room-like structures points to a man-made origin for the boat shape. Finding number 3. Angular structures at depth. The Asmorn scans also detected distinct angular features as deep as 20 feet below the surface, symmetrical, geometric shapes that mirror the architectural logic of a constructed vessel. Central voids, open spaces, and structural anomalies that don't appear anywhere in the surrounding natural terrain. The reanalysis confirms what we suspected, Jones said. These are not random shapes in the mud flow. Now, it is at this point in the story that many people ask the same reasonable question. Could GPR be misread? Could the scans be seeing what researchers want to see? It is a fair challenge. And the response from the research team is where the story deepens, because they didn't stop at radar. They went to the ground itself, the soil that should not exist. In September 2024, the research team collected 88 random soil samples, taken systematically from both inside and outside the boat-shaped formation. Those samples were sent for chemical analysis. The results came back in December 2024. And lead soil scientist William Crabtree was not prepared for what he saw. The soil inside the formation was dramatically, measurably different from the soil surrounding it. 3 times more organic matter inside than outside. 38% higher potassium levels inside compared to the surrounding terrain. An 8 times difference in pH level between the interior and exterior soil. Let that sink in. This is not a subtle variation. This is a chemical chasm. And the only explanation that fits the data, the only one that makes scientific sense, is that something large and organic decayed inside that formation over a very long period of time. The soil composition is markedly different from the natural mud flow, indicating something extraordinary at this site, Crabtree said. These are not the readings you'd expect from undisturbed geologic formations. Andrew Jones broke it down even further. If it was random mountainside earth that came down around a rock, then the soil would be the same. It isn't. The interior environment, Jones explained, shows the chemical signature of a closed system, a space where biological materials decomposed over centuries or millennia, leaching minerals into the surrounding earth and permanently altering its chemistry. He pointed to something else that is almost poetic in its specificity. The grass on the surface of the formation turns yellower in the fall, only inside the ship shape, not outside. The soil's unique chemistry is actively expressing itself through the vegetation above it, visible to the naked eye in every autumn season. A wooden vessel like Noah's Ark, buried in mud flow for 4,000 years, would rot. It would decay completely. But the chemical signature it left behind, the altered potassium, the elevated organic matter, the shifted pH, would remain locked in the soil like a fingerprint. And that fingerprint is exactly what the team found. This is the moment in the story where you have to ask yourself, if this isn't the remains of a massive ancient wooden structure, what is it? Because the alternative, that all of these readings, in all of these categories, are coincidental variations in an ordinary mud flow, requires a level of statistical faith that makes Noah's Ark look tame by comparison. The artifacts that change everything, the soil and the radar, would be extraordinary on their own. But the Durupainar site has been yielding physical artifacts for decades, and they are not nothing. Petrified wood. Lab analysis has confirmed the presence of petrified wood at the site. Wood that has been fossilized through mineral replacement over thousands of years. This is not driftwood from a river. This is ancient timber that turned to stone in place. High-tech metal alloy fittings. This is the detail that makes researchers pause the longest. Embedded in the structure, investigators have reportedly found evidence of metal alloys, including materials consistent with aluminum and titanium. These are not naturally occurring in raw form at mountainside geological formations. Their presence suggests manufactured components, fittings, perhaps, from a constructed vessel. Critics argue the claims require more documentation. Supporters argue the documentation is coming. Ancient pottery. Shards of ancient pottery have been recovered near the site, some reportedly depicting a figure resembling Noah, a bird in flight, and a fish. These images align directly with the Genesis narrative. Noah releasing a dove, the rising of the floodwaters, the preservation of life. Whether these artifacts were created by early visitors who recognized what they were looking at, or whether they represent something even older, remains an open question. Giant anchor stones. Some distance from the formation, researchers have identified what they believe are massive stone anchors, the kind that would have been used to stabilize an enormous ship in deep water. These stones, some of them carved, are unlike anything else in the surrounding landscape. None of these artifacts, individually, closes the case, but together they build a picture of something ancient, enormous, and man-made sitting in the mountains of eastern Turkey for 4,000 years, slowly yielding its secrets to anyone patient enough and brave enough to keep asking what Graham Hancock actually believes. Now, here is something important we need to address directly, because the title of this video carries Hancock's name, and you deserve to know where he actually stands. Graham Hancock has not personally excavated the Durupainar site. He has not issued official statements claiming the Ark is definitively found. That is not how Hancock operates, and it is not how honest investigation works. What Hancock has done, consistently, across decades, is something arguably more significant. He has built the intellectual and philosophical framework that makes a discovery like Durupainar comprehensible. His core argument about the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the comet strike around 12,800 years ago that triggered global floods, sea level rise of up to 400 feet, and the near-total collapse of advanced pre-Ice Age civilization, is precisely the kind of event that could have given rise to the Noah story. Not as mythology, as memory, as a recorded, traumatic truth passed down in the only medium available to survivors, spoken story, eventually written, scripture. Hancock's research has pointed to Turkey specifically and repeatedly. Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old complex of T-shaped pillars and sophisticated carvings located in southeastern Turkey, is one of his most frequently cited pieces of evidence for advanced pre-catastrophe civilization. Its builders, he argues, were the inheritors of a lost world, or the world itself, barely surviving its own ending. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which posits a comet strike as the trigger for the dramatic climate collapse around 12,800 years ago, now has physical support in the geological record. Nanodiamonds, platinum anomalies, and evidence of continent-wide wildfires in sediment layers dating to that exact period. So when Hancock looks at Durupainar, a site 18 miles from Ararat, with biblical dimensions, with underground corridors, with chemically unique soil, with petrified wood, he sees something fitting a pattern he has been describing for 30 years. The question he has always asked is this: how many ancient stories, from how many independent cultures, have to point to the same catastrophe before we admit they might be describing something real? 200 flood myths. Every major civilization on Earth, all describing the same event, all with a survivor, all with a boat. At some point, the burden of proof doesn't belong to the believers. It belongs to the people insisting it's all coincidence. The skeptics respond, and they're not entirely wrong. Fairness demands that we spend real time here, because the skeptical case is not nothing. In fact, it is a case you should understand fully, because understanding it makes the pro-arc evidence even more striking by contrast. Mainstream geologists who have studied Durapinar point to a well-documented phenomenon: geological processes, especially in regions of active tectonics like eastern Turkey, can produce boat-shaped formations through perfectly natural means. Mud flows and landslides can compress and shape debris into elongated mounds. The human brain, evolutionarily wired for pattern recognition, is primed to see ships, faces, and meaningful shapes in random terrain. They note that GPR can be misinterpreted. Shadows and reflections in radar data can look like corridors when they aren't. The software used to analyze the data involves interpretation, and interpretation is not infallible. They point out that no confirmed piece of ancient shipbuilding timber has yet been physically extracted and radiocarbon dated from the formation's interior. No anchor stone has been definitively dated and linked to the site. The pottery could have been made by later visitors who wanted to associate the site with Noah, not by the builders of the Ark itself. These are legitimate scientific cautions. They are not reason to dismiss the research. They are reason to demand the next step, and that next step is precisely what the Noah's Ark Scans team has planned: core drilling. The process of extracting cylindrical samples of material from deep beneath the surface is scheduled to begin in 2025 and 2026. This is the procedure that will either confirm or deny the presence of ancient organic material at depth. If a drill comes up with 4,000-year-old cedar, gopher wood, or any timber consistent with ancient shipbuilding, the debate ends. If it comes up with volcanic rock all the way down, the formation is geological, full stop. The team is also advancing electrical resistivity tomography, ERT, drone-based terrain mapping, and LiDAR scanning to build the most complete subsurface picture ever assembled of this site. The science is in motion. The answer is coming. But here is the question for you. Given everything we've described, the dimensions, the corridors, the soil chemistry, the artifacts, the anchor stones, the location, where does the balance of evidence currently sit in your mind? Because the researchers who have spent years at this site are not amateurs. They are affiliated with Turkish universities. They are using the same technology that has found Roman aqueducts and Egyptian tombs. And every measurement they take seems to add another data point pointing in the same direction. The most terrifying implication of all. Let's pull back for a moment. Let's go wide. Because there is something about this discovery, even in its current, not yet fully confirmed state, that is more unsettling than most people have processed. If Noah's Ark is real, then Noah's flood was real. Not real as mythology, real as event. A global catastrophe, approximately 4,300 years ago, catastrophic enough to destroy civilization as it existed at the time, killing virtually every living thing on Earth's surface and preserving only those fortunate or divinely chosen enough to be above the waterline when it hit. And here's the part that connects directly to Graham Hancock's life's work. The geological record already tells us this kind of catastrophe has happened before. Multiple times. The Younger Dryas flood, 12,800 years ago. The Black Sea flood event, believed by some geologists to have occurred around 5,600 BCE, and hypothesized by some researchers, including Robert Ballard, the man who found the Titanic, to be a real historical inundation that inspired the Noah story directly. The Mesopotamian flood tablets, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which predates Genesis by over 1,000 years and describes an almost identical event. A righteous man, a divine warning, a great boat, a flood that kills everything, and a mountaintop landing. These aren't stories from isolated cultures. They are the same story, told by civilizations that had no documented contact with each other. From Babylon to the Andes to ancient India to Norse mythology. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis already has platinum anomalies in the geological record. It already has nanodiamond evidence. It already has the support of a need-be growing number of mainstream scientists who have spent years examining ice cores, sediment layers, and extinction records. What Durupinor potentially adds to that picture is something archaeological rather than geological. It adds a human record, a vessel, a response to catastrophe, a story that the Earth itself seems to be trying to confirm. The question is not just whether Noah's Ark exists in that Turkish mountain. The question is, what does it mean if it does? It means that at some point in human history, the world as it was known came to an end. Almost everything died. A small group of people survived by building something extraordinary. And the memory of that event was so overwhelming, so civilization-defining, that every culture on Earth felt compelled to preserve it, and did, in their own language, in their own story, for thousands of years. That is not mythology, that is history, the road to the final answer. As of the writing of this script, the Noah's Ark Scans team is actively planning the most comprehensive investigation in the site's history. The next phase includes additional non-destructive geophysical surveys, more soil sampling across a wider area, electrical resistivity tomography to build three-dimensional maps of the formation's interior, and, critically, core drilling. Core drilling is the moment of truth. It is the procedure that will physically extract material from beneath the Durupinor Formation surface and bring it up where scientists can touch it, analyze it, and date it. If the drill produces ancient organic material, timber, plant matter, anything consistent with a decaying wooden vessel, the debate is over. The team is working in close partnership with Ari Ibrahim Chechen University, ensuring that the investigation meets academic and scientific standards. Turkey's governmental recognition of the site as Noah's Ark National Park provides institutional support that wasn't available to earlier researchers. Andrew Jones summed up the mission in terms that are hard to argue with. This is not just about archaeology. It's about using science to explore one of the world's oldest stories. And Graham Hancock, whose career has been a three-decade argument that our oldest stories deserve to be taken seriously, that they are not primitive fantasies but encoded truths, is watching all of this with the particular satisfaction of someone who has been saying exactly this for longer than most people were. Paying attention. The world laughed at the idea of a lost advanced civilization before the Ice Age. Then came Göbekli Tepe. The world laughed at the idea that global flood myths pointed to a real event. Then came the Younger Dryas platinum anomalies, the nanodiamond evidence, and the geological record of catastrophic sea level rise. Now the world is looking at a 515-foot boat-shaped formation in the mountains of Turkey, with underground corridors, chemically unique soil, and dimensions that match a 4,000-year-old text to within the margin of measurement error. How many times does the world have to be wrong before we start taking the ancient stories seriously? The most important discovery in human history. Here is where we land. We do not yet have absolute confirmation that the Durupinor Formation is Noah's Ark. The scientific community has not reached consensus. The core drilling has not yet delivered its verdict. The final piece of physical evidence, ancient timber pulled from beneath the surface, has not yet been placed on a lab table. But consider what we do have: a formation that is the exact dimensions of the biblical ark, in the exact location the Bible describes, with underground corridors and chambers that match the three-deck structure Genesis outlines, with soil that contains 3 times the organic matter of the surrounding earth, with a chemical signature consistent with the slow decay of an enormous wooden structure over 4,000 years, with petrified wood confirmed by lab analysis, with metal alloy artifacts, with ancient pottery depicting the figures from the Noah story, with giant anchor stones nearby, with a site officially recognized by the Turkish government as Noah's Ark National Park, and now with the most advanced scanning technology in human history pointed directly at it, producing data that independent researchers describe as consistent with, and only consistent with, a man-made structure. Graham Hancock has always said that the answers to humanity's deepest questions are out there. That the ancient world was not a primitive place, that its stories were not children's tales, that the catastrophes our ancestors described were real, and that the survivors they wrote about were real, and that somewhere in the earth, the evidence of all of it is waiting, in a mountain in eastern Turkey, 18 miles south of Ararat, 6,500 feet above sea level. Something is buried, something enormous, something geometrically precise, something that left a chemical fingerprint in the soil around it that cannot be explained by geology alone. The drilling is coming. The answer is coming. And when it arrives, whatever it shows, it will change our understanding of history, of religion, of the ancient world, and of the human story forever. So tell us, do you believe it? Do you think the Durupinar Formation is really Noah's Ark? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if this video opened your mind even a little, even just crack the door, share it with someone who thinks they already know the answers. Because the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a shocking discovery. It's the certainty that nothing is left to discover. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and stay tuned, because when that drill goes into the ground and comes back up, we will be the first ones to tell you what it found.